I'm Angelina, 35, and never imagined I'd witness my husband Derek betraying me with my brother's bride at their wedding. Jake and I were always close, which made the discovery even more devastating. For months, I'd noticed Derek acting strange but dismissed my concerns. That perfect wedding day turned into a nightmare that exposed two betrayals at once. Before I continue this story that changed our family forever, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you want more real stories about overcoming life's most painful betrayals. Growing up in small-town Michigan, my brother Jake and I developed the kind of bond that defines your childhood. Just 2 years younger than me, Jake was always my protector, confidant, and partner in crime. When our parents divorced during my freshman year of high school, that bond only strengthened. We became each other's support system, navigating the emotional aftermath together. Those difficult teenage years sparked my passion for photography. I found comfort behind the lens, capturing moments of beauty during a tumultuous time. Jake supported this interest, often accompanying me on photo walks through our neighborhood. He'd patiently wait as I adjusted settings and angles, genuinely interested in my developing skills. After high school, I pursued photography professionally, moving to Chicago to expand my opportunities. Jake chose a different path, heading to California for college and eventually landing in the tech industry. Despite the distance, we remained close, calling weekly and visiting whenever possible. 8 years ago, my life changed at a professional networking event. That's where I met Derek, a charming marketing executive whose confidence immediately drew me in. Tall, with dark hair and an infectious laugh, Derek pursued me relentlessly. Our whirlwind romance progressed quickly, and within a year we were married in a small ceremony with Jake as our best man. From the outside, Derek and I appeared to be the perfect couple. We bought a beautiful condo, traveled extensively, and built a circle of friends who admired our relationship. The first 5 years of marriage were genuinely happy. Derek supported my photography business, and I cheered his career advancements. We complemented each other well, or so I thought. 2 years ago, Jake announced he was moving back to the Midwest. After achieving considerable success in California, he'd accepted a leadership position at a growing tech company in Chicago. I was thrilled to have my brother close again, and Derek seemed equally enthusiastic about strengthening our family connection. 3 months after his return, Jake called with exciting news. He'd met someone special at a charity gala and was completely smitten. Her name was Lindsay, and from Jake's description, she sounded perfect. Beautiful, sophisticated, from a wealthy family with connections throughout the city. My brother was absolutely infatuated. When we finally met Lindsay at a dinner Jake arranged, I tried to see her through his adoring eyes. She was undeniably gorgeous, with sleek blonde hair, impeccable style, and the kind of poise that comes from privileged upbringing. While she was polite toward me, I noticed a certain distance. She answered questions about herself vaguely and showed little interest in getting to know Derek or me. I dismissed these as first meeting nerves and focused instead on Jake's happiness. He glowed around her, attentive to her every need and completely captivated by her presence. That night, Derek commented on how beautiful Lindsay was several times, which I found slightly odd, but not concerning. As Jake and Lindsay's relationship progressed, I made genuine efforts to bond with my future sister-in-law. I invited her to lunch, suggested shopping trips, and offered to help with anything she needed as she settled into Chicago life. Lindsay always accepted graciously, but maintained a certain aloofness that left me feeling like I was failing to connect. When Jake proposed after just 8 months of dating, I was surprised by the speed but supportive of his obvious happiness. He asked me to help plan the wedding, knowing my eye for aesthetics would be valuable. I eagerly accepted, seeing it as an opportunity to finally build a meaningful relationship with Lindsay. What I didn't expect was Derek's sudden interest in wedding planning. My husband, who had previously shown zero interest in social events or decor, now offered opinions on venues and insisted on joining meetings with vendors. At the time, I was pleased by his engagement, interpreting it as support for Jake and interest in our family connection. How blind I was. Around the time Jake and Lindsay got engaged, I began noticing subtle changes in Derek's behavior. My once predictable husband started working later, often coming home well after dinner. He joined a new gym, invested in expensive clothes, and became unusually attentive to his appearance. The man who once laughed about his receding hairline now used special shampoos and considered hair restoration treatments. Most concerning was the emotional distance growing between us. Our conversations became superficial, focusing on schedules and household matters, rather than feelings or dreams. When I tried to discuss deeper topics, Derek would check his phone or suddenly remember work emails he needed to send. The phone became a particular source of anxiety. Derek, who previously left his phone lying around without concern, now kept it with him constantly. He added a new passcode and positioned himself so I couldn't see the screen when texting. Several times I noticed him smiling at messages late at night, only to quickly put the phone away when I entered the room. As these changes accumulated, my insecurities grew. I wondered if Derek was losing interest in our marriage, or if I was being paranoid. I found myself checking my appearance more critically, wondering if I'd let myself go in some way I hadn't noticed. Jake and Lindsay's engagement party marked the first time I saw Derek and Lindsay interact extensively. Throughout the evening, I noticed subtle exchanges between them. A lingering glance standing slightly too close during conversation inside jokes I wasn't part of. At one point, I caught Derek's hand brushing against Lindsay's as they reached for champagne. That night, I convinced myself I was imagining things. My brother was blissfully happy, constantly at Lindsay's side, completely oblivious to any undercurrents. During a family dinner portion of the evening, Derek complimented Lindsay repeatedly on her dress, her hair, her engagement ring. While slightly excessive, nothing was inappropriate enough to raise alarms with others. Only I noticed Lindsay's slight smile at each compliment. 2 weeks after the engagement party, I tried addressing my concerns with Derek directly. I chose a quiet evening when we were both relaxed and suggested we talk about our relationship. "I feel like we've been growing distant," I said carefully. "You seem preoccupied lately, and I miss the connection we used to have." Derek sighed deeply. "Work has been incredibly stressful. The Johnson account is consuming all my mental energy." "It feels like more than work," I pressed. "You're physically here but emotionally somewhere else. Is everything okay with us?" Derek took my hand, his expression softening. "Of course, Angie. I'm sorry I've been distracted. Once Jake's wedding is over, things will calm down and we can focus on us again. Maybe plan that trip to Portugal we've been talking about." That night, Derek was attentive and loving in ways he hadn't been for months. We stayed up late talking and reconnecting intimately. I allowed myself to believe the distance had been temporary, a product of work stress and nothing more. That brief reconnection gave me false security, that our marriage remained strong. As wedding preparations intensified, so did my interaction with Lindsay. I accompanied her to dress fittings, helped select floral arrangements, and coordinated with vendors. Throughout these activities, Lindsay remained pleasant but guarded. She'd accept my suggestions with polite nods, but rarely shared her own thoughts or feelings. The bachelor and bachelorette parties were scheduled for the same weekend 1 month before the wedding. Derek originally planned to attend Jake's celebration of fishing trip to northern Michigan with college friends. 2 days before he announced he couldn't go due to a work emergency. "The Johnson team needs me in New York," he explained, packing an overnight bag. "I'm really disappointed to miss Jake's party, but this could mean a huge promotion." I believed him until the next day when I used our shared computer to check email. A hotel confirmation appeared in the browser history not for New York, but for a boutique hotel in downtown Chicago. When confronted, Derek explained it was part of anniversary surprise plans. "I was going to tell you after Jake's wedding," he said, looking hurt that I'd questioned him. "I wanted to book something special for our anniversary next month." The explanation seemed plausible, and I chose to believe it despite the lingering doubt. Our anniversary was indeed approaching, and Derek had always been thoughtful about celebrations. I pushed away suspicions, focusing instead on my brother's happiness. The week before the wedding was filled with final preparations. During a quiet moment helping Jake with his vows, my brother confided how completely in love he was with Lindsay. "I never thought I could feel this way about someone," he admitted, his expression earnest. "Lindsay is everything I've ever wanted. I can't believe how lucky I am." His sincerity intensified my guilt about my suspicions regarding Lindsay and Derek. How could I harbor such thoughts when Jake was so genuinely happy? I resolved to put aside my concerns and focus solely on making the wedding perfect for my brother. Meanwhile, Derek's behavior became increasingly erratic. He was constantly texting, jumping whenever his phone pinged. During family dinners that week, he disappeared for long work calls and returned slightly disheveled. He missed the rehearsal dinner due to another client emergency and came to bed hours after I'd fallen asleep the night before the wedding. The morning of Jake and Lindsay's wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect June day that promised ideal conditions for the outdoor ceremony. I woke early. My stomach knotted with a mixture of excitement and inexplicable dread. Derek's side of the bed was empty, the sheets cold. A text on my phone explained he'd gone for an early run and would meet me at the venue. He needed to run a few last-minute errands before the ceremony. This wasn't entirely unusual for Derek, who often jogged in the mornings, but the timing felt off. I pushed aside my concerns and focused on my brother. As the only bridesmaid who was also related to the groom, I had unique responsibilities. My morning was scheduled to split time between the bridal suite and Jake's preparation room. I decided to start with Jake, knowing Lindsay had several cousins helping her get ready. When I entered my brother's hotel suite, he was already dressed in suit pants and an undershirt, attempting to properly attach his cufflinks. "Thank God you're here," he said, his fingers fumbling with the silver accessories our grandfather had left him. "I'm all thumbs today." I took the cufflinks from his trembling hands. "Nervous." "Excited," he corrected, though the slight quaver in his voice betrayed underlying anxiety. "I just want everything to be perfect for Lindsay." As I helped secure his cufflinks, we fell into reminiscing about childhood memories. Jake recalled how I'd helped him tie his first necktie for a middle school dance, and now here I was, helping him prepare for his wedding day. "I'm so glad you and Derek moved back to Chicago," Jake said softly. "Having you close during all this has meant everything to me." His sincerity brought tears to my eyes. We wouldn't have missed this for anything. We shared a tight hug before I helped him into his jacket, straightened his boutonniere, and promised to see him at the altar. That pure moment with my brother remains one of my last happy memories of that day. By the time I left Jake's room, the hotel was bustling with activity. Guests were beginning to arrive, vendors were setting up final details, and our parents were greeting family members in the lobby. My father, distinguished in his tuxedo, gave me a warm hug. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he said, admiring my pale blue bridesmaid dress. "Have you seen Derek?" "Not yet," I replied. "He had some errands to run." My father frowned slightly but said nothing more about my absent husband. The ceremony venue was breathtaking. Jake had chosen an elegant garden setting at a historic estate just outside the city. White chairs were arranged in perfect rows on the manicured lawn. An arbor draped with white roses and greenery marked where the couple would exchange vows. The perfect setting for what should have been a perfect day. Guests continued to arrive as the ceremony time approached. I divided my attention between welcoming relatives and checking with the coordinator about final details. Still no sign of Derek. 10 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Derek stood behind me, slightly out of breath. "Sorry I'm late," he said, adjusting his tie. "Traffic was terrible." I nodded, relieved he'd made it, but noticing several concerning details. His hair was damp as if recently showered, his shirt had a slight wrinkle that was uncharacteristic for my usually impeccable husband, and most alarmingly, there was a faint smudge of pink lipstick on his collar. "What's that on your collar?" I asked, pointing to the telltale mark. Derek's hand flew to his neck. "Must be from your Aunt Martha. She practically attacked me with a hug in the lobby. You know how she is with her lipstick?" I knew Aunt Martha was wearing coral lipstick that day. Not the pink shade smudged on my husband's collar, but with the ceremony about to begin, I had no time to press the issue. The wedding proceeded beautifully. Jake waited at the altar, his face lighting up as Lindsay appeared at the end of the aisle on her father's arm. She was undeniably stunning in a designer gown that accentuated her slim figure, her blonde hair elegantly styled under a cathedral veil. During the exchange of vows, I stood beside the other bridesmaids, stealing glances at Derek in the front row. Instead of watching the ceremony, he checked his phone repeatedly, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. Across the aisle, I noticed Lindsay avoided making eye contact with me, her gaze either on Jake or downcast. Despite these distractions, the ceremony itself was touching. Jake's voice broke with emotion as he promised to love Lindsay forever. Her vows were perfectly rehearsed, eloquent, without revealing much personal feeling. They exchanged rings, were pronounced husband and wife, and sealed their union with a kiss as guests applauded. If only the day had ended there. The reception began with cocktails on the estate's terrace while the wedding party took formal photographs. Throughout the photo session, both Derek and Lindsay found reasons to step away. First, Derek received an urgent work call, then Lindsay needed her makeup refreshed. Later, Derek volunteered to check on dinner arrangements while Lindsay went to fix her bustle. My brother noticed nothing amiss, completely absorbed in his new role as husband. Jake's parents beamed with pride, commenting on what a lovely couple they made and how excited they were to welcome Lindsay to the family. As the cocktail hour continued, my cousin Megan pulled me aside. "Have you seen Derek?" she whispered. "Not for a while," I admitted. "Why?" "I just saw him heading toward the bridal suite wing," she said, her expression concerned. "He was walking really fast and looking over his shoulder." My stomach dropped. The bridal suite was in a separate wing of the estate, far from both the reception area and restrooms. There was no legitimate reason for Derek to be there. "He's probably just exploring," I said weakly, but Megan's worried look mirrored my own thoughts. "Maybe you should check," she suggested gently, "just to be sure everything's okay." I nodded, my heart pounding as I excused myself from the reception. With each step toward the bridal suite, anxiety tightened its grip. My hands trembled and sweat dampened my palms despite the air conditioning. Part of me wanted to turn around to pretend I'd never heard Megan's comment. Ignorance seemed preferable to confirmation of my worst fears. But loyalty to Jake propelled me forward. If something inappropriate was happening, didn't I owe it to my brother to discover the truth? Still, I prayed I would find nothing, that Derek would be innocently lost or helping a staff member with some task. The corridor leading to the bridal suite was empty and quiet, the sounds of the reception fading with each step. As I approached the door, my throat constricted with dread. Standing outside the bridal suite, I could hear muffled voices from inside. The sounds were too low to distinguish words, but unmistakably belonged to a man and woman. I stood frozen, my hand hovering inches from the door. Should I knock, announce my presence? Part of me wanted to flee to preserve the fragile happiness of the day. But deeper instincts pushed me forward. Jake had given me a spare key card earlier that morning in case Lindsay needed anything from the room during the reception. I'd slipped it into my small purse and forgotten about it until this moment. With trembling fingers, I retrieved the card, hesitating one final time. Taking a deep breath, I reminded myself that I might be overreacting. Perhaps Lindsay had asked Derek to retrieve something for her. Maybe there was an innocent explanation for everything. I slid the key card into the lock. The light flashed green, and I pushed the door open slowly. Nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Derek had Lindsay pressed against the wall, his hands tangled in her carefully styled hair, their lips locked in a passionate kiss. Her wedding dress was partially unzipped, his jacket discarded on a nearby chair. So engrossed were they in each other, they didn't notice my entrance until the door clicked shut behind me. They sprang apart, Lindsay hastily pulling up her dress, while Derek's face drained of color. For several excruciating seconds, nobody spoke. The only sound was our collective breathing and the distant music from the reception. "Angelina." Derek finally broke the silence, his voice strangled. "This isn't what it looks like." The absurdity of his statement might have made me laugh under different circumstances. What else could this possibly be but exactly what it looked like, really? I managed to say, my voice eerily calm despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. Because it looks like you're kissing my brother's bride on their wedding day. Lindsay's expression hardened, any pretense of embarrassment vanishing. You weren't supposed to find out this way. Find out what exactly? I demanded, anger finally breaking through the shock. Derek stepped toward me, hands extended pleadingly. Angie, please. We can explain everything. Just not here, not now. When then? I asked. After you've both played your parts at the reception. After Jake and I have gone home believing the lies you've been telling. Lindsay straightened her dress, her composure returning with remarkable speed. You need to calm down. Creating a scene won't help anyone. How long has this been going on? I asked, ignoring her attempt to control the situation. They exchanged glances before Derek admitted, A few months. Since when exactly? I pressed, needing to understand the full scope of their betrayal. Since the engagement party, Lindsay said coolly. Derek and I connected that night. The casual way she described their affair made my stomach turn. Connected, is that what you call betraying your fiancé and his sister? Derek moved closer, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Angelina, please. You can't tell Jake. Not today. It would destroy him. Unlike what you two are doing, I shot back. Playing him for a fool while carrying on behind his back. Lindsay's expression hardened. No one would believe you anyway. It would be your word against ours. Derek and I will deny everything, and you'll look like a jealous sister trying to ruin her brother's happiness. Her threat stunned me. This woman was even more callous than I'd imagined. Why? I asked. Why marry Jake if you're involved with my husband? Lindsay's laugh was cold and brief. Jake has the family name, the connections, the financial stability. Derek is... She glanced at him dismissively. Fun. Derek flinched at her characterization but quickly recovered. Angie, I was going to tell you after the wedding. Lindsay and I have been planning to leave together. The casual way he announced the end of our 8-year marriage knocked the breath from my lungs. You were going to leave me for my brother's wife. Were you planning to run away together after the honeymoon? Lindsay smoothed her hair with practiced precision. Something like that, though technically I wouldn't be his wife for long. The calculated cruelty of their plan overwhelmed me. They had orchestrated everything using Jake and me as pawns in their selfish game. Tears filled my eyes, not just for my own heartbreak, but for what this would do to my brother. You disgust me, I whispered, backing toward the door. Both of you. Derek lunged forward, grabbing my arm. You can't tell him. Not today. We'll figure something out. Make it right somehow. I yanked my arm from his grasp. Make it right. There's no making this right, Derek. If you tell him, Lindsay hissed, I'll make sure everyone knows about your drinking problem. What drinking problem? I asked, genuinely confused. The one I'll tell everyone you have, she replied with a cold smile. Who do you think they'll believe? The beautiful bride or the unstable sister? I fled the room, then tears blurring my vision as I ran down the hallway. Finding a secluded bathroom, I locked myself inside and collapsed against the door, sobs racking my body. How had I missed the signs? The late nights, the secretive phone habits, the sudden interest in wedding planning. It all made terrible sense now. I thought of Jake jubilantly celebrating with guests, completely unaware that his new wife and brother-in-law had betrayed him in the worst possible way. As I splashed cold water on my face, trying to compose myself, a war raged within me. Should I tell Jake immediately and ruin what should be the happiest day of his life? Or should I wait, allow him this day of joy, and break the news later? But waiting meant allowing Lindsay to continue her charade to sleep beside my brother as his wife while planning to leave him for my husband. The thought was unbearable. I stared at my reflection, tears streaming down my face despite my attempts to stop them. Jake and I had always protected each other. Since childhood, we'd stood together against any threat. How could I not protect him now, even if the truth would cause him immense pain? With renewed determination, I fixed my makeup as best I could and returned to the reception. I scanned the room, noting that Derek and Lindsay had already made their way back, strategically positioned on opposite sides of the venue. Lindsay stood beside Jake, her hand possessively on his arm as they greeted guests. Derek hovered near the bar, a tumbler of whiskey in his shaking hand. Our eyes met across the room, and his pleading expression only strengthened my resolve. I began making my way toward Jake, determined to pull him aside and privately reveal what I'd discovered. As I approached Jake and Lindsay, my heart hammered against my ribcage. Lindsay saw me coming and whispered something to Jake before excusing herself to speak with her parents. Jake turned toward me, his smile faltering when he saw my expression. "Angelina." "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately concerned. "I need to talk to you." I managed my voice hardly above a whisper. "In private. It's important." Jake glanced around at the crowded reception. "Can it wait?" "We're about to start the dinner service." "No," I said firmly. "It can't wait." Sensing my urgency, Jake nodded and guided me toward a small anteroom adjacent to the main reception hall. As we walked, I noticed Derek watching us intently, panic evident in his eyes. He began moving in our direction, clearly intent on intercepting us. Once inside the quiet room, Jake turned to me with brotherly concern. "What's going on? You look like you've been crying." I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could form the words, the door opened behind us. Derek entered, his face ashen. "Sorry to interrupt," he said with forced casualness. "The photographer is looking for you both for family photos." "We'll be there in a minute," Jake replied, clearly annoyed by the interruption. Angelina was about to tell me something important. Derek's eyes locked with mine, silently pleading. "Actually, I think Angie might not be feeling well. She's been acting strangely all day." I stared at my husband in disbelief. "Are you serious right now?" Jake looked between us, confusion clouding his features. "What's going on with you two?" Before either of us could respond, the door opened again. Lindsay entered, her practiced smile firmly in place. She immediately went to Jake's side, slipping her arm around his waist. "There you are, sweetheart," she cooed. "Everyone's waiting for us to start the dinner." Jake's attention remained on me. Angelina was about to tell me something important. Lindsay's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Can't it wait? This is our wedding day." The audacity of her statement after what I'd witnessed made something snap inside me. "That's exactly why it can't wait," I said, my voice stronger now. "Jake, there's something you need to know." Derek stepped forward. "Angie's been under a lot of stress lately. I think the emotion of the day is getting to her." "Stop trying to make me sound crazy," I snapped at Derek. "Jake deserves to know the truth." Lindsay's facade cracked slightly, her voice taking on a harder edge. "Whatever issues you're having with Derek shouldn't be brought up now. You're trying to ruin our special day." Jake's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "What truth, Angelina? Just tell me what's going on." I took a deep breath, looking directly at my brother. "I found Derek and Lindsay together in the bridal suite. They're having an affair." The words hung in the air like physical things. Jake's face went completely blank, as if his mind needed to shut down to process what he'd just heard. Derek immediately launched into denial. "That's ridiculous. Angelina's been imagining things. She's been jealous of Lindsay from the beginning." "That's not true," I countered. "Jake, they admitted everything to me. They've been seeing each other since your engagement party. They were planning to leave us after the wedding." Lindsay's perfect bride persona disappeared entirely. Tears sprang to her eyes, but they weren't tears of remorse or guilt. They were tears of frustrated plans and thwarted ambitions. "She's lying," Lindsay said, clinging to Jake's arm. "Why would you believe her over your own wife?" Jake remained silent, his eyes moving between the three of us. I could see the wheels turning as he processed past events, reevaluating moments and interactions through this new terrible lens. "Jake," he said finally, his voice deadly calm. "Did you find them together?" "Yes," I answered, relieved he was asking questions rather than dismissing me outright. "In the bridal suite. They were kissing. Lindsay's dress was unzipped." Jake turned to Derek. "Is this true?" Derek faltered under my brother's direct gaze. Jake, man, it's complicated. Things happened that weren't planned. His non-denial was confirmation enough. Jake then turned to Lindsay, his expression unreadable. And you... For a moment, Lindsay seemed to consider continuing her denials. Then, perhaps realizing the game was up, her demeanor changed completely. She dropped Jake's arm and stepped back. Fine, she said coldly. It's true, but it doesn't have to change anything. We can still make this work. The marriage, the connections your family's position. We can have an arrangement. Jake stared at her incredulity, slowly replacing shock. Without another word, he walked to the door and opened it. Music and laughter from the reception spilled into the quiet room. Jake, wait, Lindsay called, suddenly realizing the severity of the situation. Let's talk about this privately. My brother paused at the doorway, his back to us. For a moment, I feared he might break down, might lose control in front of the guests who had gathered to celebrate his happiness. Instead, he squared his shoulders and walked purposefully toward the band. Derek and Lindsay exchanged alarmed glances. What is he doing? Derek asked no one in particular. We followed Jake at a distance, watching as he approached the band leader and asked for the microphone. The music faded and conversation gradually quieted as guests noticed the groom standing center stage. Jake, don't, Lindsay hissed, moving toward him, but it was too late. Ladies and gentlemen, Jake began, his voice remarkably steady. I want to thank you all for coming today to celebrate what I thought would be the happiest day of my life. A murmur ran through the crowd at his choice of words. I stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let my brother handle this his way. It turns out, Jake continued, that I've made a terrible mistake. Not in hosting this beautiful event or inviting all of you wonderful people. He paused, his eyes finding Lindsay in the crowd. But in my choice of bride. Gasps echoed through the reception hall. Lindsay's father stood up, his face reddening. Jake held up a hand to quiet the growing commotion. I've just discovered that my new wife has been having an affair with my brother-in-law, my sister's husband. They were planning to continue their deception after today and eventually leave both of us. All eyes turned to where Derek and Lindsay stood, their guilty expressions confirming Jake's words. Lindsay's mother covered her mouth in shock while her father looked like he might lunge across the room at Derek. Rather than prolong this farce, Jake continued, his voice finally showing a slight tremor. I'm announcing that I will be filing for an annulment immediately. This marriage is over before it's truly begun. He looked around the stunned room, his dignity intact despite the humiliation. I apologize for the inconvenience and thank you for your gifts and presents. The food and drink are paid for, so please enjoy the remainder of the evening if you wish. For those who would prefer to leave, I completely understand and bear no ill will. With those final words, Jake replaced the microphone and walked calmly toward the exit. After a moment of shocked silence, chaos erupted. Lindsay's family surrounded her, demanding explanations. Several of Derek's friends physically blocked him from following Jake. My parents looked shell-shocked. My mother in tears, my father's face contorted with rage. I pushed through the crowd and followed my brother outside, catching up to him in the estate's garden where he stood alone staring at the sunset. Jake, I said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. He turned to me, his composure finally cracking as tears filled his eyes. Did you know before today? No, I assured him. I suspected something was off with Derek, but I never imagined this. I'm so sorry, Jake. He pulled me into a tight hug, both of us finding temporary shelter in our sibling bond. At least we have each other, he whispered. At least we still have that. After Jake's announcement, the wedding reception devolved into a scene of controlled chaos. Guests hurriedly gathered their belongings, whispering in shocked clusters. Lindsay's family closed ranks around her, while Derek stood isolated near the bar, several of Jake's friends watching him with barely contained fury. Hotel security arrived to maintain order after Lindsay's father attempted to confront Derek physically. The wedding planner, to her credit, quickly arranged for guests' vehicles to be brought around, facilitating a rapid exodus from the uncomfortable situation. Jake and I remained in the garden until our parents found us. Mom immediately embraced Jake, tears streaming down her face. Dad stood rigidly beside them, his jaw clenched in anger. "We should leave," Dad finally said. "This isn't the place to process what's happened." Jake nodded numbly. "Where should we go?" "I've arranged a suite at a different hotel," Dad replied. "Somewhere private where we can talk." As we walked towards the parking area, we passed several departing guests. Some offered awkward condolences to Jake, while others averted their eyes, unsure how to acknowledge the situation. Jake accepted each interaction with remarkable composure, thanking people for coming despite everything. We managed to leave without encountering either Lindsay or Derek. Dad had arranged for our overnight bags to be collected from our rooms, eliminating any need to return to the original hotel. The drive to the new location was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The suite Dad had secured was spacious and anonymous, a generic luxury hotel room that offered privacy and comfort without reminders of the wedding. Once inside, Jake finally allowed his carefully maintained facade to crumble. He collapsed onto the sofa, head in his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Mom sat beside him, her arm around his shoulders while Dad paced the room, making occasional phone calls to update extended family members. I moved to the minibar, pouring drinks for everyone. We all needed something to steady our nerves. "I'm so sorry," I said, handing Jake a glass of whiskey. "I feel like I ruined your wedding day by telling you." Jake looked up, his eyes red but clear. "Don't apologize. You saved me from a much worse fate. Imagine if I'd found out months or years later after building a life with her." "How could she do this?" Mom wondered aloud. "And Derek, I thought he was family." Jake took a long sip of his drink. "Lindsay told Angelina why. Apparently I have the family name and financial stability she wants. Derek was just fun." Dad stopped pacing, his expression darkening. "She married you for your money and connections, while sleeping with my brother-in-law," Jake confirmed with a bitter laugh. "Quite the power couple they make." I sat across from him, my own marriage collapsing around me. Derek told me they were planning to leave after the wedding. I'm guessing after they'd extracted whatever they wanted from us. As the night progressed, more truths emerged. Jake revealed that Lindsay had been unusually interested in his financial portfolio and had suggested adding her name to his accounts immediately after the wedding. I admitted the signs I'd noticed in Derek's behavior, but had dismissed or rationalized away. Around midnight, Jake's phone began buzzing constantly with text messages from Lindsay. "She's threatening legal action for public humiliation," he read aloud, scrolling through the messages. "Says I've damaged her reputation and caused emotional distress." Dad, who had been making calls to his attorney friends, shook his head. "She doesn't have a case. If anything, you have grounds to sue for fraud. She entered the marriage under false pretenses." Did you sign a prenup?" I asked, suddenly worried. Jake nodded. "Ironically, her father insisted on it to protect their family assets. It has an infidelity clause that works in my favor now." While Jake dealt with Lindsay's threats, my phone remained conspicuously silent. Derek had made no attempt to contact me, which spoke volumes about his priorities. We stayed up most of the night processing the betrayal and formulating plans for the difficult days ahead. Jake decided to file for an annulment first thing Monday morning. I would contact a divorce attorney and secure our financial accounts immediately. The next morning brought the awkward reality of facing the outside world. Several guests had posted vague references to the wedding drama on social media, and Jake's phone continued to buzz with messages from friends and family seeking confirmation of rumors. The hotel staff eyed us curiously as we gathered in the lobby, undoubtedly aware that something significant had occurred. A wedding party checking out of different hotels the morning after the ceremony was unusual, to say the least. As we prepared to leave the front desk, clerk approached Jake. "Mr. Sullivan, there's a gentleman asking to see you. He says he's your brother-in-law." Jake looked at me, raising an eyebrow in question. After a moment's hesitation, I nodded. We needed to face this eventually. Derek stood in a small meeting room off the lobby, looking disheveled in yesterday's clothes. When we entered, he moved toward me, but Dad stepped between us. "You have 5 minutes," Dad informed him coldly. Say what you need to say and then leave. Derek's eyes darted between us. Angie, please. Can we talk privately? Absolutely not, I replied. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of my family. He ran a hand through his unkempt hair. I never meant for this to happen. Lindsay and it just happened. I still care about you, Angie. Where is she now? Jake asked, his voice dangerously calm. Derek flinched. She left last night. Went to stay with friends. Not with you? I asked, surprised. A flicker of pain crossed Derek's face. She said we need to lay low separately for a while, until things calm down. Jake laughed humorlessly. Already abandoning you, is she not surprising? She's just upset, Derek defended weakly. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. How exactly were things supposed to go? I demanded. You two carry on your affair while Jake and I remain oblivious, or were you planning to run off together after cleaning out our bank accounts? Derek's silence confirmed my suspicions. Mom gasped softly behind me. I want a divorce, I stated firmly. I've already called an attorney. You'll be hearing from them tomorrow. Derek nodded resignation, replacing his earlier desperation. What about the condo, our accounts? You forfeited any right to negotiation when you slept with my brother's wife, I replied. But if you want to test that theory, we can discuss your financial improprieties in court. His head snapped up. What financial improprieties? The money you've been transferring from our joint account to your private account, I said, bluffing based on a suspicion. His panicked expression confirmed I'd guessed correctly. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Jake moved closer, his presence intimidating despite his calm demeanor. I think it's time for you to leave Derek, unless you'd like to explain those transfers to my father's friend at the Financial Crimes Division. Derek backed toward the door. I'll have my things out of the condo by tomorrow. You'll remove your belongings when my attorney says you can, I corrected. Until then, stay with one of your friends, or Lindsay if she'll have you. After Derek left, the full weight of what had happened settled over us. Not only were Jake and I dealing with betrayal, but we now faced the practical aspects of untangling our lives from people we'd trusted completely. The days that followed brought more revelations. Jake's attorney discovered that Lindsay had attempted to access his investment accounts the night before the wedding. My own investigation revealed Derek had indeed been siphoning money from our joint accounts for months preparing for his planned departure. Most shocking was finding airline tickets on Derek's laptop. He and Lindsay had booked one-way flights to Buenos Aires, departing 3 days after what would have been Jake's and Lindsay's return from their honeymoon. They had planned their escape meticulously, intending to disappear with as much of our money as they could take. The initial shock of discovery gave way to a more profound pain as the reality of our situation settled in. For me, losing an 8-year marriage was devastating enough, but watching my brother process his public humiliation added another layer of heartache. Jake, who had always been my protector, now needed protection himself. In those first weeks after the wedding, Jake retreated almost completely from social life. He took a leave of absence from work, ignored calls from all but his closest friends, and spent days staring blankly at television shows he wasn't actually watching. The vibrant, optimistic brother I knew seemed diminished, his confidence shattered by Lindsay's betrayal. My own grief manifested differently. I threw myself into the practical aspects of divorce, meeting with attorneys, documenting financial discrepancies, and securing what assets I could. The busy days kept my mind occupied, but nights brought crushing loneliness and questions that had no satisfactory answers. How had I missed the signs? Could I have prevented this somehow? Would I ever trust anyone again? Our parents became our foundation during this time. Mom came to stay with me after Derek moved out, helping me reorganize the condo and remove traces of our life together. Dad focused on Jake, involving him in renovation projects at their home, providing physical tasks that required concentration but little emotional energy. The legal processes moved forward with painful slowness. Jake's annulment faced unexpected complications when Lindsay contested it, demanding a financial settlement despite the prenuptial agreement. My divorce proceedings stalled when Derek's attorney requested extensive financial discovery, a transparent attempt to delay the inevitable. Depression settled over me like a heavy blanket as summer turned to fall. I stopped accepting photography jobs, unable to summon enthusiasm for capturing happy moments when my own life felt so broken. My portfolio website remained unchanged, showcasing wedding photos that now seemed like cruel jokes. Jake and I spoke daily, our shared trauma creating a new dimension to our sibling bond. We developed dark humor about our situation, finding small moments of levity in the absurdity of what had happened. At least we found out they were terrible people simultaneously, Jake would say. Very efficient of them. The first holiday season after the betrayal loomed like an approaching storm. Thanksgiving at our parents' home felt hollow despite their efforts to create normalcy. Christmas brought well-meaning but painful questions from extended family members who hadn't heard the full story. By New Year's Eve, Jake and I had developed a mutual avoidance strategy for social events, begging off invitations in favor of a quiet night watching movies at my place. Through January and February, I attended weekly therapy sessions, finally acknowledging I couldn't process the betrayal alone. The therapist suggested Jake and I consider joint sessions, recognizing our healing processes were deeply intertwined. Those shared sessions became turning points for both of us. I keep thinking about what I did wrong, Jake admitted during one particularly emotional session. What I could have done differently to make Lindsay actually love me. That's not how love works, the therapist gently explained. Lindsay's behavior reflects her character flaws, not your worthiness of love. Gradually, these insights began to penetrate the walls of pain we'd built around ourselves. Jake returned to work initially part-time, then with increasing engagement as projects demanded his attention. I accepted a small photography assignment documenting architectural spaces, rather than people easing back into my profession without the emotional complexity of human subjects. By spring, 6 months after the wedding disaster, both our legal situations had resolved. Jake's annulment was granted when Lindsay's attorney recognized the mounting evidence of her fraudulent intentions. My divorce finalized with a settlement that, while not ideal, freed me from further entanglement with Derek. The final divorce hearing brought unexpected closure. Derek appeared gaunt and subdued, nothing like the confident man I'd married. During a brief conversation after the proceedings, he revealed that Lindsay had ended their relationship shortly after the wedding, having found a better opportunity with a wealthy business associate of her father's. She used both of us, he said, his voice hollow with belated recognition. I destroyed our marriage for someone who never actually cared about me. His realization offered no satisfaction, only confirmation that the people we'd trusted had been unworthy of that trust all along. As the one-year anniversary of what would have been Jake's wedding approached, my brothers suggested we reclaim the day with a new tradition. Let's go somewhere, he proposed during our weekly dinner. Not to forget what happened, but to acknowledge we survived it. We booked a weekend at a wellness retreat in northern Michigan, a place focused on healing and renewal. Walking through autumn forests, participating in guided meditation sessions, and spending evenings in deep conversation by the fire became our way of marking the painful anniversary. During those quiet days away from everyday pressures, Jake shared something that surprised me. In a weird way, he said as we watched sunrise over a misty lake, I'm grateful it happened the way it did. Grateful? I asked, uncertain. I'd heard correctly. He nodded slowly. If Lindsay had been smarter, more patient, she could have hidden her true nature for years. I might have had children with her, built a life on a foundation of lies. Finding out on our wedding day was devastating, but it saved me from a much longer, more complicated heartbreak. His perspective shifted something in my own thinking. The betrayal had been painful, yes, but it had also revealed truth that might otherwise have remained hidden for years. Derek's character had been exposed before we had children, before our financial entanglement became even more complex. Returning to Chicago after that retreat, both Jake and I approached life with renewed purpose. I rebranded my photography business, focusing on editorial and commercial work rather than weddings. Jake accepted a promotion that had previously intimidated him, embracing the challenge with newfound confidence. our social circles shifted and evolved. Some friends drifted away uncomfortable with the messiness of our situation. Others emerged as true supporters, checking in regularly and creating space for our complicated emotions. New friends entered our lives, people who knew our stories from the beginning and accepted us without judgment. Through it all, the bond between Jake and I strengthened beyond what I could have imagined. We developed an unspoken understanding, a shared language of recovery. Small gestures took on profound meaning: a cup of coffee delivered during a difficult morning, a text message checking in on triggering anniversaries, planning regular family dinners that gave us both stability and connection. 2 years after the wedding day disaster, Jake met someone new. Catherine, a children's book illustrator with a quiet intelligence and genuine warmth, approached relationships with the same cautious optimism Jake had relearned. Watching their relationship develop, slowly built on honest communication and mutual respect, healed something in me as well. My own journey focused more on self-discovery than finding a new relationship. I rediscovered passions I'd set aside during my marriage, took classes in subjects that had always interested me, and developed deeper friendships that fulfilled emotional needs I'd previously expected only a romantic partner to meet. When Jake nervously introduced Catherine to our family, I felt only genuine happiness for my brother. The shadows of betrayal had not disappeared entirely, but they no longer defined our expectations for the future. Looking back now, I recognize that wedding day as a pivotal moment that ultimately revealed more than it concealed. Jake's courage in confronting the situation publicly became my inspiration for handling my own pain with dignity. The betrayal that could have destroyed us instead became the foundation for more authentic lives. For those of you watching who've experienced betrayal or heartbreak, I hope our story offers some perspective. The pain you feel now is real and valid, but it isn't the end of your story. The truth, however painful, always serves us better than comfortable lies. Healing isn't linear, and it rarely follows the timeline we'd prefer, but it does come eventually. Have you ever experienced a moment when something painful ultimately saved you from something worse? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit the like button. Your support helps me continue sharing these difficult life lessons and reminds all of us that we're never truly alone in our struggles. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads to gaining what you truly deserve.